Alright, so this is how I think the houses should be ranked before the books came out. Now, there are some surprises here. For example, we had the Baratheons at number one, which I think they should be because King Robert is Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, so that pretty much elevates that house to the top. But also, another reason why they take the top spot is because the Baratheons are lords of the Stormlands, so that is another big reason why they're sort of, elevated to the top. And if you look at the Lannisters, for example, the reason why they're not first is because they don't have someone sitting on the Iron Throne. They do have Cersei, who is Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, but that's not the same as being King of the Seven Kingdoms. There's a big deal in Westeros, in having a son and him playing a major role within the world. And I think if the Lannisters at this point in time had someone sitting on the Iron Throne, they would be first instead. But in this case, it's the Baratheons. But obviously, the Lannisters are still impressive. Tywin Lannister is Warden of the West, and he's also Lord of the Westerlands, so that is very impressive. Some very, very impressive titles. And obviously, I just mentioned that Cersei is Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, or at least I think I mentioned it. So that's a big deal. And Jaime Lannister is a Kingsguard, so they've got a lot of influence in Westeros. They're in some pretty high positions. And I think the biggest surprise on this list is probably the Arryns at this point. They're number 3, and I think they're rocking. But I never ever hear anybody talking about the Arryns. We hear people talking about the Starks, the Lannisters, probably even the Baratheons, but no one ever talks about the Arryns. I don't think I've ever heard anybody talking about the Arryns. And maybe there's a reason for it. But, you've got Jon Arryn. He's Hand of the King, which is a massive deal. He's also Lord of the Vale. He's Warden of the East. So that is a massive deal. Some massive titles, and, he's just rocking at this point. But obviously, he gets poisoned, as we'll go through when I talk about the events of the first book. But yeah, I think the Arryns, they're really underrated, especially pre-books. And then obviously, we've got the Starks at number 4. Really, I really didn't know where to put the Starks because it's not like the Starks in King's Landing. It's not like, with Theon Greyjoy, he's from the Iron Islands, but he's living in Winterfell in the north, as a warden to Ned Stark. I suppose he's kind of like a hostage, but, either way, he's a character that he's not from the north, but he's living in the north, where he's from, a different, part of the world. The Iron Islands aren't that far away from Winterfell, or the north, but, anyway. So yeah, there's examples like that of characters that, have positions elsewhere from where they're originally born, I guess, yeah, if that makes any sense. And yeah, the rest of the list is pretty much, I think how it should be. I don't think there's really any, reason to really kind of change it or, really go through it. We will go through kind of, more houses as we go through each book because, certain events happen that are important that sort of changes the position of certain houses. So, we'll do that. And yeah, the last one we'll kind of go through is the Targaryens. So, obviously, they are the worst house before the books even start. They're in pretty bad shape. They're not even in Westeros when the book starts. So, yeah, they're in shocking state. And yeah, obviously, they do work their way up as the books go along, but at this point in time, they are the worst house on this list. Now, on that, I think these are the major houses, in the books and even in the show. Even though I think I'm going to be looking more at the books with this list because, the show does get kind of iffy. People probably know about what happens in the later seasons, but, we won't go there. But, obviously the Targaryens, I think I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, yeah, so that's pretty much my list at this point in time. So we'll start going through the first book and, we'll see what changes kind of happen. Alright, so this is my list after the end of book one. Now, I don't think much really changes because there's only a few houses that are really involved at this point in time in the first book. So a lot of the houses are kind of bystanders, so, they're not really doing much. Now, I think one of the big changes, I suppose, maybe not massive, but I think one of the big changes is the Lannisters going from second to one. Now, the reason why this happens is because we know that Ned Stark discovers that, Joffrey is not actually a Baratheon, he's actually a Lannister. So he exposes that truth to pretty much the entire realm. So at this point, towards the end of the first book, everybody knows that Joffrey is a Lannister and not a Baratheon. So, and we know that Joffrey actually becomes Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, so he's sitting on the Iron Throne as a Lannister. So that means that the Lannisters take the top spot. And we see Tywin in the show trying to like kind of conceal, or he doesn't believe that Joffrey is a Lannister. But at this point in time, everybody knows that Joffrey is a Lannister, so Lannisters take the top spot. Baratheons go down one because obviously King Robert gets killed by a boar. A pitiful way to get taken out, but there you go. And so Baratheons get taken down one. And it's probably not a massive deal going from first to second, it kind of does seem like a big deal, you had top spot, what happened, you lost it. But, the Baratheons are still very powerful. They've got Renly Baratheon, they've got Stannis Baratheon, who do end up fighting in the second book, which, we'll go through later on. But yeah, there's still got, a lot of players. And they're still Lords of the Stormland, so, that's, everything's good there. They're not in King's Landing anymore, but, at this point in time, it's probably not that big of a deal. And yeah, I think going on to the Arryns, which I think are the biggest movers in this book, because Jon Arryn does get poisoned, so he gets taken out. Now, Lysa Arryn does become Wardeness of the East and Lord of the Vale. So, obviously, you still have an Arryn in power, and obviously you've got Robert Arryn, who, is too young to take power, and I think too sick. But yeah, I think the Arryns do get taken down, a couple of levels, because obviously they have no one as Hand of the King anymore. So there isn't that, real influence in, someone in a high position. So they go down. And I think the Starks are a house that, that do go up, which does sound weird because Ned Stark loses his head. So it's like, how the fuck does a house gain a position when they've just lost a person, lost a member? But yeah, I think, in this case, Robb Stark replaces Ned Stark as Warden of the North. So, and that's like towards the end of the book because, Ned Stark loses his head towards the end of the book. So, Robb gets, reinstated towards the end. So he becomes Warden of the North. And obviously you've got Sansa, who is still in King's Landing. Now, she is betrothed. Let me get this right. She is betrothed to Joffrey, so in essence, she is next in line to become Queen of Westeros, so that's a massive deal. Even though she's kind of a hostage, she still has that position as someone who could potentially be, you know, a big ruler in Westeros. So I think that's a big deal. Um, and yeah, I just think that overall, some of these houses that do lose members, their overall power within the world doesn't really change that much because you've got other members within their house that sort of replace them. So I think that's a big deal between, you know, some of these houses like the Starks and the Baratheons compared to the Arryns, where there isn't someone who can replace a member that has been lost. So yeah, those are my thoughts, and yeah, that's about it. All right, so this is the list after the events of Book 2. So obviously, in Book 2 we have the War of the Five Kings, which was pretty epic in my opinion, but maybe other people will say otherwise. Um, and number one spot is still the Lannisters. They still have someone on the Iron Throne, so nothing's changed there. Stannis was defeated on Blackwater, which is a massive deal because, as Salladhor Saan says, he is a broken man, and I don't think there's coming back from this. He's pretty much lost his army, and there is no way Stannis gets on the Iron Throne because if you put it this way, Stannis is a character that, he has certain views and, morals and stuff like that. So for some reason, he doesn't want to work with Robb Stark, for example, to take down, obviously the Lannisters and, take over the Iron Throne. The reason for this is because he thinks that, Robb is a usurper because he declares himself king in the North. So therefore he is against his claim to the throne, which I guess kind of makes sense because, if you're Stannis, for example, and someone declares themselves king in another region of Westeros, you're going to be thinking, what the fuck is this? And it's not just him, Balon Greyjoy declares himself king. You have obviously Stannis declares himself king. You have King Joffrey, and there's one more. I just can't really think of it though. There is one more king. Obviously, there's the king beyond the wall, but I'm talking more Westeros region. I suppose you could say, the far north beyond the wall is part of Westeros, but I'm just mainly talking about, the Reach, the North, and places like the Westerlands and even Dawn, to some degree. Anyway, so and yeah, I think Stannis, really shot himself in the foot. If you would have, I suppose swallowed his ego, because I think it was an ego thing where he didn't really want to work with anyone, and even Renly Baratheon, I think he could have come to some sort of compromise with him in, working together with him. But then obviously, he does kind of take out Renly and take his army. So I think either way, it didn't really matter. But, in the grand scheme of things, it does weaken House Baratheon because you have one less member. Obviously, King Robert died. And then Renly died, so you've only really got Stannis. And, of course, he does have, his daughter, Shireen. But, like I said, it's a big deal having a son in Westeros. If you don't have a son, it's really hard to kind of claim power within the world. But yeah, let's talk about another house now. I've talked about the Baratheons for, quite a while. Obviously, there are big players in the second book, so, there you go. Another house that sort of comes into it is the Tyrells. They obviously helped the Lannisters defeat the Baratheons on Blackwater Bay. And, I think this is where the Tyrells really start climbing up the rankings because they're sort of non-existent, before the books and even in book one, and then all of a sudden they come out of nowhere and like they're like massive and fair play to them. So I think on this list I have the Tyrells going from sixth in the first book to second, which is a massive jump. Like let's not sugarcoat it. Like that's a big step. Um, and yeah, maybe it always showed that the Tyrells had the potential to become one of the biggest houses in the realm. I think that was definitely, uh, you know, a possibility. But then, for example, you look at the Arryns, who did have that position where they're one of the biggest houses in the realm, but then they sort of lost it all. And that's what happens. If you lose one member, some of these houses just fall apart because they don't have enough people within the house to really, keep it going. Which is a shame, really, but that's how the game is played. Um, and looking at it, there's no real other house that really shifts around. In my opinion, things are pretty much the same. All right. I've got the phrase going from 12th to 11th, but that's not really significant. But yeah, I think that's about it for book two. Obviously, the Targaryens are still number 13. Daenerys does marry Khal Drogo, and I forgot to mention that in book one. Book two is kind of slightly different events. I'm going back and forth here, but bear with me. So Daenerys did marry Khal Drogo, and they sort of do. She gets that kind of army. I can't really confirm how big this army was. We hear people throwing around, oh, they've got 100,000, riders and stuff, or 100,000, strong. I'm not sure what that really means. I think maybe what they mean is that the Dothraki has, excuse me, there's over maybe 100,000 Dothraki, people, and maybe a fraction of that are warriors. So maybe the army, excuse me, maybe the army isn't even that big. Like it's a decent amount, but maybe not enough to actually, overthrow the lords of Westeros. But as we know, Khal Drogo dies, which probably was inevitable because we see Daenerys trying to push Khal Drogo to go to Westeros to claim the Iron Throne, and there's the incident where Daenerys nearly gets poisoned, and that really pushes him over the edge to really go to Westeros and do what he needs to do, and he ends up being killed by another Khal, which is kind of ironic because people talk about how fucking epic Khal Drogo is, but he got taken out by another Khal. So anyway, that's about it for book two. Alright, so this is the list after book three, and this is probably the last major book where a lot of stuff sort of happens. Obviously, we've got book 4 and 5, but I feel like not a lot really happens in those books in terms of houses shifting around, which is kind of boring for this list, but we'll still go through it anyway and talk about anything that's important. So obviously the Lannisters are still number one, and we have to really commend the Lannisters for this because we know how difficult it is to stay at the top. Obviously it's called the Game of Thrones, and obviously, I'm saying obviously a lot, but there's always houses that are trying to take you out, or people in certain positions that are looking to what's the word I'm looking for? They're looking to scheme against you and try to take themselves to a higher level. So yeah, we've got the Lannisters number one, and we'll go through the events and what changes happened there. And the interesting one I've got is, well, there's actually quite a few in this book, but the Boltons become number 3. So they go from 9 to 3. Now, the reason for this is because the Starks really dropped the ball on this one. I think the reason why the Starks, fall the way they do is because they are seriously naive. Now, I do think that Catelyn Stark is one of the smartest members of the Stark house by far. I just think that she has so much knowledge that she just knows how to anticipate certain situations, but obviously she didn't anticipate the Red Wedding. And I think that was kind of tough to kind of navigate because she didn't really have the kind of authority to really, tell Rob what he can and can't do. But either way, letting the Kingslayer, leave was a massive mistake on different levels and for different reasons. And it just ends up, it fucked over the Stark house massively. And, going back to the Boltons, I'm going to go back and forth here, but, the Boltons really benefited from the Stark house falling because obviously the Boltons become the Wardens of the North and they have a lot of favor with the Lannisters and even the Freys as well. The sort of kind of allies. So, there's some powerful partnerships that have been built there, which is kind of impressive and also interesting. So they rise up the rankings. Then you've got the Starks going from 3 to 13, which that is a massive drop. Let's go through it. The Red Wedding. Catelyn Stark gets taken out. Robb Stark gets taken out. Jane Westerling gets taken out. Now, Jane Westerling is Talisa Maiga in the show, for anyone that's confused. If you're this far into the video, well done. But yeah, that is the difference. And yeah, she was pregnant as well, which is kind of fucked up, but anyway. But it's a wedding as well, that's, it's fucked up on different levels. And then obviously Blackfish escapes. Pretty much the entirety of House Stark is wiped out in this night. I'm not quite sure how, obviously if you're drunk, that's not really a good thing in this kind of situation, but whatever. And yeah, the Starks, they could have done things so much differently. But even, the war with the Lannisters, it was kind of petering out. Like, it wasn't really going anywhere. Technically there was a war, but in my opinion, it wasn't really a war. It was just, send troops here, send troops there, have a fight. The Starks weren't ever going to win. And it was the same with the Lannisters. I suppose the Lannisters didn't have as much to lose, but at the same time, it was kind of like a stalemate, It didn't really seem like anybody really cared at this point. And I think the shows did well to kind of show this because, it's almost like this war didn't even matter anymore. It gone on for so long that, both sides were kind of just like, fuck it. We still got reasons to fight, but, we're just not going to try as hard. That's the kind of feeling I got, but, yeah, you can take it how you want. Yeah, so the Starks dropped the ball massively. Targaryens are massive movers in this book. So, we have Daenerys, she went to Astapor. She sacked the city, which, everybody thinks is pretty epic, but I thought, it is kind of cool, but she kind of did it in bad faith. Like, she did a deal where she wanted to trade a dragon with, the merchant who was talking shit the entire time. If you read the books, the guy's basically talking shit about Daenerys, the entire time that, they're in the vicinity of each other, which is pretty funny actually. And the translator is trying to make things better. Like he'll say that the master will say that Daenerys is a whore, and the translator will say that he says that the troops are worth like X amount. So she sort of she makes things a lot better, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Um and yeah, so Targaryens sack the city. They get the Unsullied, which is a massive deal because they're some of the best warriors in the world. Then they go to Yunkai. They take over Yunkai. Then they go to Meereen, which has never really made much sense to me. Like, I have no idea why Daenerys... Alright, I get why she leaves Astapor. Excuse me. I get why she leaves Astapor because it's not really that big of a city. If you go to Yunkai, if you take that over, like, that's a big deal. I have no idea why Daenerys didn't stay in Yunkai. Like, I have no idea. Like, she goes to Meereen afterwards, but... yeah, it never really made sense to me, and even now, it makes no sense to me. But anyway, yeah, she goes to Meereen, she takes over the city, she abolishes slavery, her dragons get bigger. I mean, everything is happening for Daenerys at this point. She's got strong Belwas in the books. She's got Barristan Selmy, who joins her. Jorah Mormont leaves because he gets banished, so he has to go away. But she's still got a lot of strong people around her, and yeah, she's got quite a big army. Obviously, when she abolishes slavery, you've got the Sons of the Harpy that are against her, and pretty much the entirety of Essos is against her. But we'll kind of go later on. We'll touch on that later on in book 5. But obviously, big book 4 and book 5 are kind of they're sort of one book. That the events are happening at the same time. It's just that it's just separated into different books because there's so much content. But yeah. But anyway, Targaryens go up quite a bit, and let's talk about the Baratheons quickly as well. And even the yeah, let's stay on the Baratheons because at this point, fuck it, I was about to say Robert. Stannis Baratheon, he's still broken, and I have no idea. Like, there's a lot of decisions that characters make where you're just thinking, what the fuck's this character doing? But Stannis goes north, and this is because fucking hell, I'm really bad at remembering names. But the Red Woman, that's kind of a joke. Melisandre, that's right. Melisandre, says that they have to go north, so they go north. And really, I just don't understand it. Like, why would Stannis Baratheon go north? I know that he could possibly build up an army and bring that down south, but there is something in the books where it said that any army that has come north to south has never come back home, and there's a reason for that. So Baratheon's making some stupid decisions again. And then we've got who else? I think those are the major movers in this book. The Boltons, the Starks in the wrong way, the wrong direction, the Targaryens, and yeah, that's about it for book 3. Oh yeah, obviously, before I forget, the the Purple Wedding. Obviously, I talked about the Red Wedding, but there's obviously the Purple Wedding in this book. So Joffrey Baratheon gets poisoned. So why are the Baratheons still number 1? I mean, fucking the Lannisters. The reason for that is because Queen Cersei becomes ruler of the 7 Kingdoms. Now, normally it is a male character or a male sitting on the Iron Throne, but I think she sort of takes that position because she was queen, and I think Tommen is too young to become ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. So she sort of takes that mantle in his place until he comes of age. And yeah, the thing about this is, the Tyrells did poison Joffrey. And yeah, I think it's mentioned that, obviously, Lord Baelish says that, he basically says that, the poison came from one of, Sansa's necklaces, and, that's how he got poisoned. But, really, the Tyrells didn't really benefit that much from this, because when you think about it, they're still second on this list. They have no one sitting on the Iron Throne. They do have members sitting on the council, but their real goal is to have someone sitting on the Iron Throne. And obviously Marjorie was supposed to be queen, which she does become queen. But it's very, very brief. I'm not sure they were really even married. I mean, Joffrey gets poisoned at his wedding, so are they really married? So, I don't really know. So, either way, Tyrells didn't really benefit that much. Now, there's one less person to compete with. Joffrey's dead, but I think it was a move that didn't really, I guess, achieve that much, in my opinion. Yeah, and that's about it for book 3. Alright, this is the last ranking. I'm going to be combining books 4 and 5 because they are, they're along the same timeline. They're pretty much the same book. It's just they're separated, as I mentioned earlier. And this is how it kind of looks. The Starks are rock bottom. They are a house that are pretty much finished. Because, let's take a look. Sansa Stark has now become Elaine Stone. She's a completely different character. So, she's not even a Stark anymore. So that's one less Stark out of the game. And then we have Arya Stark, who is training at the House of Black and White to become a faceless assassin. So, she's not even Arya Stark anymore. She's an extension of the many-faced god. A faceless assassin. So, she's out of the game as well. So then you ask yourself, alright, who's left? You've got Rickon Stark, who I'm not sure where he is in the books. He is traveling with Osha, but, it's like, where the fuck are they? And then you have Bran Stark, who is way, way, way north. And she's doing something similar to, Sansa and Arya, where he sort of changed his identity. He's still Bran Stark, but he's training to become... Actually, I don't even know what he's trying to become. I think he's just trying to, I guess, master his powers, I guess. Brian's storyline is very, unclear to me. Like, I'm not sure what he's really trying to achieve and why he goes so far north. Now, it's obviously to, I suppose, master his abilities, but it never really seemed worth it. So, in my opinion, I think he's out of the game because even if he does master his, his powers, his walking powers, I'm not sure what he's really going to be able to accomplish. That's just my opinion. So there's no one else in House Stark that can really do anything at this point. So, they're probably in a worse position than the Targaryens because obviously before the book start, because at least the Targaryens had, members that I suppose were in essence trying to get back to the Iron Throne, although it was, very slow. But at this point in time, it's like none of the Starks are trying to really build themselves up to really take over the throne again. I say again, like, it's not like the Starks were ever sitting on the Iron Throne, but they're not really making any, changes to really go in that direction, if that makes sense. A convoluted way to put it, but there you go. And so what do we have here? Obviously, the Boltons are still 3, the Wardens of the North, they have all these connections, so, well done. the Lannisters are still number one because you have Cersei sitting on the throne. So there you go. And what else do we have? Actually, Cersei actually ends up getting arrested in the 5th book. So I'm not sure if she's really still ruler of the Seven Kingdoms, because if the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms can get arrested, then I suppose you're not really the ruler that you should be, or if you really have that kind of power, because, what kind of fucking ruler gets arrested? Anyway, I still keep the Lannisters as number one because, there's no real official change of the title of the person who's ruler of the Seven Kingdoms, so Lannisters stay as number one by default. And then we've got the Tyrells as number two still. They're still influential in Westeros, although, the Sparrows kind of, because of Cersei, they fuck up both houses. And, they fucking, they're probably the real rulers of Westeros, to be honest. They're fucking, they're doing some mad shit in those books. And then you've got, I haven't really mentioned all of these houses, like the Martells, for example. The Martells would have been higher up on this list in the books if they'd actually done a lot more. They're so slow in, their plans, and you have Doran Martell, who's very methodical. He doesn't like to make big moves too quickly. He's very, he's like, he basically is an old man. So he's an old man, so he doesn't do things quickly. But I do think that the Martells would have been higher up on this list if, they've been a lot quicker with their plans. But obviously, that's the way they want to play it. So, that's what happens. Obviously, you've got the Arryns still. And, the Arryns are on the ropes. They're 6 on this list, but they could easily be lower. And I think they would be if, or maybe when another book comes out, because we know Lysa Arryn dies. Lord Baelish, pushes her out the moon door, and he blames it on the fucking, musician. Which is unfortunate because, he's just a guy that is doing his job, and now he's on death row. Anyway, so, yeah, the Arryns. So, we still got Robert Arryn. But, the thing with him is that he is quite sickly, as the books describe it. He's struggling. And it suggested that, he's gonna fucking die soon, unfortunately. Which means that the Arryns will be no more. There's no one else left in the Arryn family. So, like I said, if there was another book, the Arryns would probably become last. And that's what would happen. And yeah, we've got the other houses like the Tarleys, the Starks, and the Greyjoys. But actually, no, the Greyjoys are an interesting one because obviously Balon Greyjoy dies, and Theon Greyjoy, he gets captured by the Boltons and, fucked up. And then we have Asha Greyjoy, who, it's pretty disappointing what happens to her. Obviously we have, Balon Greyjoy's brother, fucking, is it Aeron? No, it's not Aeron, it's the other one. Who's the other fucker that has been around the world? You guys know who I'm talking about. It's, Euron Greyjoy. Yeah, he comes back, like a badass. He takes over the fucking place. He kills Balon. He tells Victorian to get Daenerys for him. He does all this stuff, but, in my opinion, I don't think Euron's gonna really accomplish much. He says he can bind dragons to his will, but, we're really yet to see if that can actually happen or how that actually works. And then, I think his whole plan is to become ruler of the Seven Kingdoms, but I don't really see it happening because I think the goal is too big, and he doesn't really have enough resources to accomplish it. But then again, there's my opinion. The Greyjoys, I suppose, do have potential, but it's not really a thing for me. So there you have it. That is the list. I didn't really go in depth with all the houses, but I think there is enough info there to, have the houses placed how they are. I might make another more in-depth video talking about things. I'm starting to lose the will to talk, but there you go, and we'll see you in the next video.